Welcome to Lesson 6 in the WPF with MVVM add-on course. In this lesson, we're going to build the Create Person form. This is the form that doesn't exist as a separate form in our WinForms project, but we want it to be its own piece in WPF. This should be rather simple, so let's get started. Okay, so first, let's open up our Create Team form in our WinForm project, just so we can see what we're working from, what we want to replicate. So we're just replicating this section right here, the Add New Member section. And in fact, the only method we have, the only button we're going to have is the Create Member button. So let's go over to our view models, right click and say Add Class, and we'll say this is the Create Person view model. Take that out. So I'll change that. So now the background is back to that transparent on our team view. See the white background for a Create Person. And we essentially want to replicate what we have most closely on our Create Prize form. So really simple. Now we do have them side by side here. Now in our Create Team, we have them on top of each other, the label versus the text box. But here is side by side. So let's just replicate that and see if it works for us. We can always change it later. So we're going to grab essentially this entire thing. Down through here and make sure that everything lines up. So see first name, not place number. First name, and the name would be first name. The next one will be last name. And the name would be last name. The next one down will be our, I believe, email address. Yep. We just called it email. So email. And the next one, we're going to take this one out. And we really just want what is the next row. So we'll take out that and we'll change this to be row 3. There we go. And we call this cell phone. And so we'll call this cell phone as well. So there's our 4 fields with our 4 labels corrected and with our 4 text boxes using the new property names, the ones that we should be using. Finally, we have this button. And instead of Create Prize, we're going to say Create Person. And then that means we should also change the label to say Create Person. So now our form looks visually correct. We just need to make the modifications now to the view model, or actually create a view model that lines up with these 4. So far it's been really quick. We'll change this right here to say 4 and grid row 4, which that honestly doesn't make a big difference, because if there's nothing in row 4 and this is in row 5, then that row 4 collapses down. We're going to do last name. And again, we'll add that property. I'll also move this up. And I can take out this extra space. I can add my spacing back in here. And then add my notify of property change here. That's 2 properties down, 2 to go. Let's do it right underneath, because I keep removing an extra space here. So let's do it right underneath. And I'll say, again, this is a string email. And we'll do our notify. And we'll move our private backing field up. Now there's no space there, that's kind of nice. And last one, I type that better, prop full. And it's a string as well, and it is cell phone. I believe I did it lowercase p. Let me just check to make sure. So cell phone, lowercase p, that's good. And now I can just expand this out, add my notify. And I will move that private backing field up to the top. Now you may be wondering, I keep doing this where I put it at the top, which I said is a personal preference. But in this case, it makes no difference in the application. There's no benefit to putting it at the top. There's no benefit to putting it in the middle. Now, in my personal opinion, it's a little bit of a benefit to putting it at the top visually or for the next person that's reading this application, but that's it. So there's no difference here. However, if you're inside of a method and you declare your variables at the top of that method and then do your code, that will make a difference compared to declaring your variables just before you use them. Slight difference, very slight, but it is a difference. So when you hear about, oh, don't put your variables at the top, that's talking about methods, not about classes. There's a difference. All right, so you have our 4 properties. We can actually collapse these down. First, last, email, and cell phone. And now we need one method, and that method is called createPerson. So public void createPerson. And we'll actually pass in string first name, string last name, string email, and string cell phone, because I want to do validation on these, and I don't want to create a property and say notify a property change 4 times. So we have our createPerson, and we'll leave it alone for now, but then I'll create my can createPerson, public bool can createPerson. Now I'm just going to copy this line instead of retyping it. And I'm going to say if first name dot length is greater than 0 and last name dot length is greater than 0 and email dot length is greater than 0 and cell phone dot length is greater than 0. Return true. Again, I could just return this entire statement, but it's a little long. I'd rather return it in a separate line, just because that way it's a little easier to debug. Because I put my breakpoint on line 61 or line 65, and it's just a little bit more clear what's happening. So can createPerson, and it's going to check those 4 values. If they all have something in them, we return true, meaning you can't have a blank email or a blank cell phone. Now, I think we talked in our original project, we can check this. If, let's go find it. So create member. We don't actually do any, here's a validation right here. So go to valid form. And it's checking for all 4 of them to see if their length is 0. So what it's doing is making sure there's no blank fields. I thought maybe we discussed possibly allowing a blank cell phone, but I guess not. So in that case, this works just fine because it checks all 4 fields and all 4 have to have a value. Now, one thing we ran into before that we need to make sure we learn from and change is we need to initialize these strings. Otherwise, it's an empty string and doesn't have a length. Actually, it's a null, sorry, not an empty string. So now they have an initial value of an empty string. Now this create new person model should work as far as at least showing the information properly and not allowing the button to be clicked until we fill in those 4 values. So let's go over to our Solution Explorer, go to our shell view model, and instead of create team view model, let's activate the create person view model. We'll run this. Hopefully we'll have something that at least displays our form, which it does. The button is not enabled. If I type something in first name, nothing happens. Last name, nothing happens. Email, nothing happens. And cell phone, something happens. It enables. If I wipe out email, no longer. So I now have a check to make sure the entire form is filled out. Now, just like with our WinForm app, this is not a really sensitive validation. It's not making sure that your cell phone has a valid number or a valid phone number. It's not making sure your email has the @ and a dot, something like .com or something like that. It's not doing any of those checks. It just says, really basic, you have to have 4 values. If you want to go further than that, you can. And in that validation logic is where you do it. So right down here in our, not shell view, But right down here in our can create person, you could add more intense scrutiny on your 4 fields, but I don't think it's necessary for this application. Now, all we have left to do is fill in this create person method. How do we do that? Well, here is the logic we had. Create a new person model, fill it in, create that person, then add that person to the list. We don't have that portion of it yet, and we don't need to clear out our form because we're going to be wiping it out when we're done. So we can just grab this. We can come back to our create person, paste it in. First, we need to do a control dot here for our models. And now, instead of all of this, we just paste in our 4 properties we have passed in. And that should complete that. We'll do our control dot here. And we'll add a to-do statement saying that we need to send results back to parent and close. So there we go. We've now wired up that button. We've wired up the create person button. So really, this form is complete. Really simple form. It was just 4 properties and a button, and we already had the logic for how to create the person. So all we really need to do was do that can create and replicate the validation logic, and we're done. Now, we could go on and wire this into our create team form, but I'm actually going to separate that out into the next lesson. That way it's a totally separate topic. We can talk about how to wire the 2 forms together. So that's what's coming up next.